thank you for joining the Kentucky Couple Travel Podcast. I'm Clifton.
And I'm Whitney.
So, in this episode 4, we're going to talk about a trip that we were fortunate enough to take in April of 2021. So, it was on our spring break. Every year, our school system where we teach, we have spring break the first week of April. And we decided to go on a trip and kind of split it up. It was a 5-day trip, and we went and stayed in Tombstone, Arizona, and then we went to San Francisco, California. And so we're going to talk some today about all we did on that trip and some things that led us to go there. I guess right off the bat, we decided to go really because I'm a huge fan of the movie Tombstone. I
actually chose to go to Tombstone, but he does love the movie Tombstone.
So I'm hoping that's why she chose to go, because she knew thought I would like it.
Well, I knew you would like it, but I really like it too.
But we're kind of history buffs too. We love going and doing things and seeing things we never saw before, but also places where historical events happen. So I will give a little shout out to the movie Tombstone. If you've never watched it, it's a classic. It's one of those movies probably if you're already quoting the one-liners from it, even if you've never seen it. So that was kind of what led us there. So just a little funny story. We're kind of in a heat wave here in Kentucky right now, so we're kind of having flashbacks to Arizona.
There it's a dry heat.
Yeah, that's what they always tell you.
It's not dry here. It's a little humid.
Yeah, that's a running joke they have kind of in the western states, in Nevada and Arizona there in the desert. It's a dry heat.
Well, Arizona's the biggest for it, because everywhere we went, like if you would say it's hot, every person I met said it's a dry heat.
Yeah, they had it printed on T-shirts, magnets.
So we came out with some T-shirts. We came out with some. I think I got a postcard. It's like a skeleton, and it said it's a dry heat. So we literally joked about that. We still joke about it, but yeah, it's a dry heat.
But in Kentucky, as you know, it's never a dry heat. It's a humid and muggy heat that we have. But it was definitely not the case in April of 2021. Actually, when we left, again, we flew out of Cincinnati, the CVG airport there in northern Kentucky, and it was snowing. There was kind of flurrying the snow. The night before, there had been kind of a dusting of snow on the ground when we got to our hotel. And then when we had landed in Arizona, in Tucson, it was in the 90s, and it's 30, 45 minute drive from Tucson. We rented a car and drove down to Tombstone, and it was in the mid to upper 90s there in April. But again, like they said, it's a dry heat. And
the one little nugget there, we flew out pretty early that morning.
Mm-hmm.
Was it? I think we was there like 4 or 5
4 a.m. I think our flight was at 6.
So let me just tell you, this girl hates to travel in the morning. I don't know. I know everybody's like, you can sleep on the plane, and I did a little bit, but it just messed with my equilibrium, as they said at work. But anyway, it just, I don't like it. So I made a note to Clifton. I said, from now on, we will not travel that early. So I try to find flights that are not that early. So I just want to tell you about how bad I hated that. So
yeah, so we always at least try to get there 2 hours before a flight. I know in some instances that's overkill, but there are those rare instances where, that just barely leaves you enough time. So we always try to do that. I would rather, kind of be boarding the airport than be in a mad dash trying to get to your gate. So going back to this trip, the way we're going to do this in kind of most of our podcasts going forward, it's the way we did kind of the format we used in episode 1 when we talked about Buc-ee's. Is a top 5 list. The top 5 things we liked, and then a minimal amount of things that we dislike. We kind of got away from that in our last episodes just because there was so much to talk about, but we're going to get back to that today. So we're going to start with Whitney and let her tell you her number 5 thing for this trip. So just keep in mind, this trip involves Tombstone, Arizona. Then we... after we stayed there for one night, we flew back to, we drove back to Tucson, and then we flew to Oakland, and so we checked out San Francisco and Oakland for a day, And then the next day, we drove up to Northern California through like wine country, kind of that Napa Valley, in to see the Redwoods. So we're going to talk about just this entire trip in this episode, and just group it all together into our top 5 things that we like and a minimal amount of things that we didn't like. That's probably more Whitney's expertise. I'm
not a complainer that bad.
No, she's not bad. But, we always have tried to stick, 5 to 1, 5 good, 1 bad, just so it's not negative. And she's like, I've got 3. And so she's kind of a negative Nancy over there.
Well, I'm just kind of, I don't know.
Just something must have stuck with her.
A drama queen, maybe. I don't know. Just when I travel, I like things to be smooth.
Yeah, so I have no idea what her lists are. So we'll just see there at the end of the episode. So, Whitney, why don't you go ahead and start us with your number 5 favorite thing that we did on this trip?
So, because of the way I group these, the 5 are going to be, it's a little bit tough because some of them are pretty broad. But for 5, I put driving around to see the sights. And what I mean by that is we rented a car in California when we got off the plane. So that's something I really enjoy that we do a lot of times, is like even when we fly somewhere and we want to knock off a couple of states or some surrounding areas, we usually rent a car and we'll drive different places. Like we've done it so many times. Like we drove through and seen like some things in San Francisco, which I have some of those on my list, but we saw some things there, and I just really like to do that. I really like to rent a car and drive around a little bit, especially after you've had long flights, or even like we had a cruise this last time. It gives me a little bit of a break to get out and drive around. So that's probably my number 5, was just getting to see the sights at a little bit slower pace.
Yeah, that's something we always try to do, and it's kind of changed how we do that. I mentioned in the last episode kind of what we use to rent cars usually now. Back then, we were still kind of the traditional, getting on Priceline or, some sort of website to book through your Hertz or Enterprise or Budget or, Dollar rental car services, just those national brands. And those worked fine for us. We never really had any trouble. And it's just, it can be a hassle. Sometimes the prices are fluctuating. You kind of feel like you're being upsold. But, we've switched now. We go with Turo, and where people rent their personal vehicles, kind of similar to an Airbnb situation. So, again, we recommend that. But that's something I really
enjoyed.
I
have to say that, like, when we rented a car in Tombstone and we rented a car in California. I'm trying to think back because it's been a little bit of time. But if my mind serves me correctly, when we rented in Tombstone, like, I feel like you're really more stressed because you do feel like you're being hustled sometimes by car rental places. So you're constantly taking pictures. You're looking at everything because because they have your card and stuff on file. And it's just, I don't know, sometimes the way they portray themselves in those places, you kind of feel like, oh, if there's a scratch or this is wrong or that's wrong, then I'm going to get like a major fine.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just kind of that persona they have, like the horror stories you hear going into it.
But I feel like what we've been doing, like you said lately, what we've been using
works really well for us.
And I can't even say what it's called. I don't even know because he does all that for us. But yeah, Turo. Yeah. So I really have liked that. I feel a little less pressure. I feel like it's a little easier.
It's more laid back. The app makes it really simple. You kind of have some conversation with the person before you get there, so it's not like a total stranger. By this point, you've talked a couple times leading up to your trip. But, yeah, I enjoyed that as well. I enjoyed seeing the sights. So my number 5 takes us to Tombstone, and it was the Birdcage Theater. So we said we're a huge fan of kind of history and things that happen. So there are a lot of places in Tombstone that are original or close to, and then there's also quite a few, and maybe even the majority, that have been rebuilt. They're replicas because Tombstones went through fires and just over time. When Tombstone was in its heyday, it was a long time ago. Now it's going to be quite a long time ago, and so it's just had its ups and downs. But the Birdcage is the one place that is still, it felt to me, the most original. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So the Birdcage was a saloon, theater, gambling hall, restaurant, probably a hotel, and a brothel. And, in this small strip that Tombstone is, I believe it's Allen Street, you're looking at 100, 200 yards start to finish. And all these landmarks are there that you've heard of, that you see in the movie, or you've heard of if you are familiar with kind of that Wild West cowboy type history. And the birdcage seemed the most authentic.
Yeah.
When you go in, there's kind of this lobby. They kind of have this bar top that you can really imagine like people serving you at now. It's kind of where they check you out. They have some souvenirs and some merchandise. But you can look and see there are, and I believe I'm telling you this correct, there are 3 bullet holes where the bullet is still in the wall. You can see on paper, but you can see the bullet's actually still in the wall or in the bar from a fight that broke out, whether that was in the saloon, maybe from 2 people that were gambling and getting in an argument, or whether it was a gunfight outside that ricocheted and maybe come into the building. So I just thought that was so amazing. And then they give you the opportunity to kind of do a backstage self-guided tour of it. You got to go kind of into the original birdcage, and there was just so many artifacts. It was just this huge room, kind of a theater, and where they would do plays. And
they say it's haunted, so
yeah.
we don't go into that because Clifton is terrified of stuff that says they're haunted.
Yeah, we don't talk about
that. And I make
a
joke out of it because I'm not scared of it at all. I mean, I guess if I saw something, I'd probably freak out. So I literally was trying to take a lot of pictures in there because they're like, it's haunted, and you can see things in your picture. So I was snapping them like crazy, but I didn't see anything. You know?
So that I have blocked out of my mind and hope to keep it that way. But thanks for bringing it up.
Looking.
But you go into this room and you see the stage, you see the just where all the seats were, but they also along the side and the edge they have artifacts. You go through and look, and one of the things that was really cool was they had the table where Doc Holliday dealt cards. And it was still there. It was under glass. You could see these old timey playing cards. I
have pictures of that stuff.
Yeah, and that's another. We're going to put up a blog post about it, and everything we're talking about, you will be able to see on our website, KentuckyCouple.com.
And I'll make a post about it on our Facebook page as well.
We'll get all that information out to you, so you can see what we're talking about. But it was just amazing to look and see these things. Just for me, even something as simple as playing cards. My family, we love to play games. We love to play cards. And so to see what playing cards were like 150 years ago, I mean, just those little things was amazing. Anything else you remember from the birdcage that really stood out to you?
I really liked, I'm just so strange sometimes, but I really liked the bottom, like the basement. Mm-hmm. It was like, it was very original parts of it, and it was like, it just looked like some of it hadn't even been touched. Like,
if I remember right, was that not where like some of the rooms were where they would stay and sleep?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they had them set up like that, and you could peek through the doors and look at them.
Yeah, and look what a room was like. And I was like, it was so odd. It almost reminded you more of like a jail cell.
Yeah.
It was the way it was set up.
It was a lot of rock, and it was a lot of crushed things, and it was just, you could tell it, like, they just kept a lot of it in the state it was in, it wasn't like redone or anything. Yeah.
So that was a really good place. If you, like I said, if you're ever there, I'm sure it's a place you'll stop. There's, Tombstone's one of those towns you can do everything in a day and a half. But the birdcage was awesome. So why don't you go ahead and tell us number 4 on your list?
Okay. Number 4 on my list was I really liked in San Francisco. I liked seeing the Full House, and I guess that kind of I could have put that. I was trying to make 5 stretch out because, like I said, mine are gonna be pretty broad. But driving around seeing the sights, but I really liked it. I thought that was really cool. I would like to have gotten out. We kind of were pressed for time, so I would really like to have got out, like maybe stand in front of it more and stuff. But that was really cool. Like, again, I like going to places where there are movies or shows that I've watched, and that was really cool because you see it on TV and then you see it in person. So that was cool.
That was neat. And like I said, this was a trip we were kind of pressed for time. There were just so many things we wanted to see.
Back to work,
and we didn't want to just fly home on a Sunday and just. So we tried to get back with a day or two to kind of catch our breath before we go back to work. But with this house, and you'll see it in the pictures, I guess so many fans of Full House over the years has came by the house, and maybe knocked on the door or thought they could go inside. But there's a sign that says, this is a private residence, please be respectful. So we just kind of drove by, stopped, slowed down, took a picture. And for those maybe not familiar with Full House, it's, from our childhood, one of the probably most
it's a 90s
famous show, one of the most famous 90s shows there is, the Olsen twins, and Bob Saget, was on there. And on the opening scene, the show is set in San Francisco. In the opening scene, there's this, house that's just kind of stereotypical San Francisco on a hill, and it's every episode that it's there. So obviously, wasn't filmed inside the house. It's just the outside they used for the introduction, the opening credits of the show. But it's there. Still looks just like it does on TV. Mm-hmm. So been well maintained, but it's in a really nice neighborhood too. All right. So number 4 for me, back to Tombstone, was the OK Corral. I thought this was something it was a reenactment, is the way, you kind of go into it. They're telling you it's going to be a reenactment. And so I was like, this is probably going to be a little corny. But there were a lot of other things going on at the OK Corral that I didn't know when we went there. So this kind of famous fight that, the movie Tombstone's based on, and kind of the lore of, Tombstone is centered around, the gunfight at the OK Corral. And in this situation, when we went in, you had the reenactment, and there's also a little show. They have this diorama. You go in, and it kind of moves, and it's like this handmade kind of sculpture that turns and lights up, and it's really old. But as it showed you these different scenes that this artist has made, there's a track playing, and it's telling you about the history of Tombstone. And, that it's not just, the gunfights. It's not just the Wild West, but it was a mining town. Mm-hmm. And it's, a town that had to endure, so many things, throughout its history. And it's still there. It's still standing. It's still a real town that you can go to, not fictional, and people still live and work there. So I thought that was really cool for me. As impressive as the reenactment and the history of the OK Corral itself. So, anything you remember from there, Winnie, that stands out to you?
From the OK Corral?
Yeah.
Everything I loved it. That was like one of my favorite things. It was exciting. It felt real to me.
It did.
It didn't feel. And I was poking Caitlin because at the time she was single, and I was like, "Yeah, look here, you're trying to get her to go down there and talk to those guys dressed up," and it was just a fun time. Like, I loved it so much, and I think it seemed like the audience really got into it, and they did a really good job explaining. They looked a lot like the movie characters and stuff. Like, I loved it. So
I think it was cool. What it did is it did a good job of bridging the gap between the movie and what's fiction. And the thing about Tombstone is they tried, for the most part, to really, especially around the OK Corral and some of those things, and the things that's happening in town, they tried to tell an accurate story. Now, that's not the case for the entire movie, but in this instance, it was fairly similar. But they did a good job of showing you, okay, this is maybe where the movie gets it a little wrong, or they exaggerated a little bit, but there really was that gunfight. It really happened, and it's a cool place for me. All right, so
one thing I say, when I say Caitlin, that is my cousin who also went with us on that trip. So she traveled along with us, and that was her first time flying and traveling that far. So,
and if I'm guessing, that may come into play later in another one of your
maybe so.
Things. So, all right. So number 3, Whitney, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you have for number 3?
Okay, number 3, I had like the cruise around the Alcatraz. That was in San Francisco. The cruise around Alcatraz and all around the Golden Gate Bridge.
That was actually my number 3 too.
Interesting.
So when we went to San Francisco, we like I said, from Tombstone we drove back to Tucson, and then we flew to Oakland. In Oakland, we rented a car, and the plan was to drive to San Francisco and go to Alcatraz. Now, that didn't work out, and we'll get into that later. But we we go, and there's a cruise, like there's a little ship, not a cruise like we just got back from, but just a cruise.
Like a dinner boat cruise,
yeah,
sort
dinner
of, maybe
cruise.
a little bigger.
Yeah,
they did have like snacks and stuff.
Yeah, and that takes you out in the harbor of San Francisco, takes you under the Golden Gate Bridge, tells you the history of the Golden Gate Bridge, and then circles around Alcatraz a few times, let you get some great pictures that we have that we'll show you, and the history of the prison. Alcatraz may be the most famous, one of the most famous prisons that there is in the United States, and kind of the history of it, and all the things that went on there. So, Whitney, what are some things that you liked about it?
Well, let me first go by telling you, we were not prepared with clothing for that trip. That I had on jeans and a t-shirt with like a sweatshirt over top of it. First of all, around that water is so choppy in the ocean there. It is pretty intense water, and the wind blows like a lot, but it's not warm air.
And it was like 50 degrees.
It is cold. So on the boat, we froze. Like we had a hot chocolate, and we were just passing hot chocolates around, trying to keep our hands warm. Just kind of hunkered down. I mean, it was a great trip, but very
Whitney
cold.
also spilled her hot chocolate in her seat.
I did.
And I was so cold. I was like, I'm not even moving. I'm just going to sit here in this hot chocolate because it's a little warmer than I am.
I was kind of miserable cold, especially going out there because they don't really slow down. So,
No.
But it did slow down when we got out there, and that did get a little bit better. But after we saw what we wanted to see, we just went down onto the bottom of the boat where it was closed because I was cold. So just a little quick note for you. If you ever decide to go in the spring, I'm not sure what summer's like, but if you go in the spring, take something a little bit warm and something to cover your head and some gloves, because if you take that boat ride, you're going to get cold. So, but other than that, that was like, I loved it because I am like a crime junkie person. I love watching stuff like that online, on TV or reading about it. And just because I had read a lot about Alcatraz, and we'd actually went to a little museum in Pigeon Forge, which is close to us, a crime museum that kind of mimics that and talks about Alcatraz, and it's kind of just giving you ideas. So I was like really pumped about it, read about it for years and followed a lot of things about it and all the escapes and things that they tried. And so that was really exciting for me. I wanted so bad to go on there, but for purposes we did not go off the boat. We weren't able to, but that was just amazing. Like, I loved it. And I would definitely love to go back and do another tour of that. And also, the Golden Gate Bridge was much bigger than I thought it would be.
Oh, yeah.
It was massive, and it just felt surreal to me because you've seen it in pictures so long. And then to actually be under it and around it, it was so cool. So I loved that little trip, even though I froze to death.
Yeah, it's kind of iconic, and there's so many things. I think places I've been that I can think of that you have this image of what they're going to be like from TV, and seeing them online or something, and you get there in person, it just doesn't quite do it justice. But the Golden Gate Bridge is one of those things that actually surpasses my expectations. So for me, I always try to tell some interesting facts about places we've been, and the Golden Gate Bridge is one of those things that really stuck with me. How amazing it was, just like you said, the sheer size of this bridge, and the amount of wire that was using the bridge. So we need to remember how many times they said.
I can't remember.
Okay, so one of the things they told us in the cruise, and I remember I instantly looked it up. I was like, that can't be right. But there's enough wire in the, holding up the Golden Gate Bridge and in the structure that if you were to take the wire and wrap it around the earth, it would go around the earth 3 entire times. And I was like, that is amazing. That much wire is in this one bridge. And then with Alcatraz, like I said, it's iconic. But I think what was the most amazing to me was not the prison part of it, but it was the kind of the history of after it closed the prison. It was occupied by a Native American group, and they graffitied it kind of out of protest. It was a protest, and all that graffiti was still there, and so you'll see those images, like I said, on our website. But I thought that was a great part of our trip.
That was a good experience, and I didn't put this in anything because I wouldn't consider it like on my top list. But I really liked the little pier there. I thought that was kind of cool. I would like to have spent more time there. Had some great shops and food and things to do.
It was a really cool place to hang out.
It was starting to close, so we really didn't get in there like we wanted to. But I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice place.
Go a little early and spend some time at the pier.
All right. So I guess that was my number 3 too. So we'll go right back to you. What was your number 2?
Okay, so my number 2 was the Redwoods.
Yeah,
I love the Redwoods. I know it's probably is that on your list?
It's my number 1.
I figured it would be because you loved it. But I'm just gonna go ahead and say one of my negatives about that trip. Okay, so I told Clifton, he's learning me, but sometimes he just tries to appease me. I'm a person who has to literally have snacks every 5 minutes. I know it's crazy. I'm not a skinny girl. I like to eat, okay? So, and I also, I take diabetic medicine. I am a diabetic and stuff, but I'm like, okay, I've got to eat on a schedule, whatever. I got to have my food. So Clifton's like, let's just wait a little bit. We'll eat a little bit later because it was kind of early and we got started. And he was like, I'm not real hungry yet. And I wasn't crazy hungry. But on that trip from Oakland, San Francisco area to the Redwoods, there is very minimal food or gas stations. So, just to let you know, as amazing as they are, please take snacks if you like to eat because we were so hungry. That is one of my negatives, is we were not prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I had to throw that in there because it was a good time to talk about it.
I think, you think of from Kentucky, California, like, well, there's just cities everywhere.
Well, I'm just thinking there's a Taco Bell on every corner. I mean, every turn, every round trip. But we literally...
I just didn't feel like we were going to be somewhere really remote in California.
No.
But, like, we're close
bathrooms, zip.
Yeah,
okay?
we're closer to civilization here in the mountains than some of the places we were driving.
So we found... We would drive, like, hours before we saw a gas... Because it was like a 5... How many
it was 5 hours each way, and we did it in one day. I was killed when we got back.
Oh, my gosh. But it was so tiring. And I could have spent a long time there because it was amazing. And it would be a trip on its own.
Yeah.
But
I think it was probably like 4.5 hours from our hotel in San Francisco to the patch of redwoods that we were going to see. It was a patch that you could drive through, and it makes a loop. It's called the Avenue of the Giants. Like I said, this is my number 1 thing.
We were able to drive through one of those trees.
Mm-hmm.
There's pictures of that.
Again, it's similar to Alaska in the sense that there's nothing we can say to explain how big the redwoods really are. We have some pictures that do a pretty good job of it, but just till you're there in person. And it was one of those. To me, there's 3 things that I've seen that words are it's indescribable. Alaska, the redwoods, and then the Grand Canyon that we'll talk about probably in a episode pretty soon. It was just unbelievable.
And I love the forest floor there because it's like they don't have as much like stuff like we have, all that extra stuff growing. They don't have that. You can walk anywhere it's flat. You just kind of walk through there, and they tower you. And it's just so amazing. But like I said, make sure you take snacks. Make sure you got plenty of gas and not go on any low because it may be a while before you get there. And be prepared that there's not bathrooms. I had to go to the bathroom once and we had to pull over at these random porta potties. So that was not a fun time for me because but yeah, so we starved to death. But other than that, it was amazing and I would recommend it.
Maybe a good time since our last couple have kind of went together, a kind of a funny story about that day. So, like I said, it was 4.5. We get up early. It's 4.5 hours out to the Avenue of the Giants just to get there. Then it's a 2 or 3 hour loop that you're on because you're stopping to look at trees. You're getting out. You're taking pictures.
I mean, there's something everywhere to see.
There was even when you get through it, there's a drive-through tree that you go through and drive a vehicle through. Yeah. And then 4.5 hours back. So, I mean, this is a full day. So
not out of your car very much.
Yeah, so we're up at probably 6 a.m. We're gone by 7 a.m. And I think we get back, and it's like close to midnight. I know we dropped Caitlin off at the hotel.
I know what you're going with.
We went and returned our rental vehicle, and we get back to the hotel, and it's after midnight. And so there's really nothing open but
And we
pizza
are
places.
starving.
Yeah, like we have had nothing to eat other than like chips.
I found a Lunchable at a random gas station.
Yeah, like chips from a gas station. That's what we've ate. Just snacks that you get, kind of
Boring.
just random junk food.
No
So that's what we've been on, and I mean hours upon hours. So we get back to the hotel, and the way the hotel was set up, you had to use your key card to get in the door, and then into your room. So to get to our hallway, you had to use your key card to get into the building, then into the hallway, and then into the room. So you really had to have that key card, or you were just out of luck. So we order a pizza, and they.
It's late. It takes a while.
Yeah, it takes a while. I think it was Domino's, and
our room is directly beside the stairway
that walks
to go
up
down
to this
the
hallway.
parking lot. Yeah.
There's a stairwell outside our room that goes down to the parking lot, and but you have to go out your room, down a hallway, and then loop
just
back
a little
around.
bit. We were really close.
Yeah. So Caitlin and Whitney went out to meet the delivery driver to get the food. You had to meet him at the door. This was like peak COVID time. Like still, they're not entering the building. You got to come to the car.
You
got to have a mask.
So you have to walk down to the bottom of the steps.
Yeah, all this stuff. Well, while they're there, and it probably, honestly, they were not gone a minute. I fall asleep on the bed, and I'm exhausted. I'll just say I didn't have a shirt on. I just ball shorts, barefooted, and I fall asleep, and I instantly start dreaming. And if you've ever had one of those dreams, like where you're hearing what's going on around you, I guess you just start to doze off, and so you're kind of your mind's aware of what's going on around you, but you're not, and your dream is trying to match up with what you're hearing. And so in my mind, I imagine like I'm dreaming that Whitney is being like choked by somebody, and it's like she's going Clifton, and that's what I hear in my dream, and I come to. And you know how everything's a little bit louder when you're just first waking up, like if something wakes you up and you're starting.
Clifton.
Well, it was Caitlin because they had forgot the room key. She is leaned over the stairs and over our balcony. Her stomach.
We were gonna try to climb.
Her stomach is like stuck on the
I gotta do it from my side.
the rail, and so she's straining her voice to try to wake me up.
Trying not to be loud because she was kind of banging.
So it's a
on
half
the wall
whisper,
because
half
you don't want to wake everybody
scream.
up. Yeah.
And I'm up. I run out onto the balcony with both fists drawn. I'm ready
to fight the
to
Dominoes,
jump
man.
over our balcony onto the
so let me
somebody
go.
who has kidnapped
Okay.
my wife.
So just let me tell you, from my point of view, we were freaking out. We had all this pizza in our hand, no card key. We didn't take any cell phones. I know it's probably a question, why didn't they call? Nothing. So we get up there, we can't open the door, but we're so close. I mean, we're literally like, you just reach out and touch our rails, but they were high enough and awkward enough that we could not climb them to get on our balcony to go in because the balcony door was open. So I was like, Caitlin, let's try to get Clifton up and kind of bang on the door a little bit and just yell at him. So she's like, Clifton. I mean, 2 seconds later, he comes out like Walker, Texas Ranger. The man is, oh my God. I'd give anything if we had a video of that because he jumps out, he's shaking his fist in the air. And I'm doing it right now on the couch. Shaking his fist, and he's like, he was ready to fight. Like, literally, fight that man. So
I thought I was going to protect my woman. I thought in my mind, in my dream.
He had already taken me, and Caitlin was there trying to get help.
Yeah, like I just felt like somebody was screaming, like so desperate, screaming. And I was like, all right, I'm meaning business. I'm going to launch myself off this second floor balcony and hopefully just take the guy down on impact.
Like, we laughed so hard, I was crying. Clifton wasn't. He didn't think it was as funny at first.
Well, I'm still half asleep.
But man, we laughed and laughed and laughed. So that was great.
Yeah, so that was kind of drove home the point of how long a day that was. I was mentally exhausted.
Oh, he's funny when he's scared. So
yeah. So Hey, at least I wasn't backing down from the challenges.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to know that you would jump off a second-story balcony with only ball shorts on and no shoes to protect me.
Hey, I was coming for blood.
Appreciate it.
So, all right. So I guess that gets us to my number 2. And okay, I'm just going to say this: if the Redwoods were not so amazing, if it was not one of the top 3 places I've ever visited, this would be number 1. If this was somewhere, a local trip that we'll talk about down the road, it would easily be number 1 for me. And this may sound odd. And like I said, let me preface this by saying I'm a picky eater. So when I find something I really like, it means something to me. Because I'm weird. I'm a picky eater.
So this is your number 2.
This is my number 2. Only second to the Redwoods, maybe like one of the wonders of the world. And so we're walking up Tombstone. It's 1 million degrees, but it's dry heat.
It's dry, so you're not gonna sweat.
So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When you say, "Hey, it's 100 degrees," they're like, "Who cares? It's dry heat." From somebody that just left snow, it was still hot. But we're walking up. We're going in and out of these saloons and these museums, and I mean, just this amazing time that we're having. And
he's starving.
I'm like,
because he ain't ate much.
I smell. I mean, Italian that is like food that is just smells great. Like garlic is hitting me so strong. I'm like,
his nose is like
this is not what I was expecting. Like 30 miles from Mexico, I was not expecting this Italian food smell. So I was like, and I look, and there's this pizza place coming up, and it's like literally 2 doors down from the Birdcage
Hole
Theater.
In the wall, small.
And I'm like, all right, we're going to look at everything we got to look at, and we're going to come back here, and this is where I'm going to try, because it smells great. And so we go, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this. The place was called Mario's Bakery Cafe. So they had homemade, cannolis and chocolate chip cookies and all this stuff as a bakery. But they also had brick oven, made from scratch pizza.
It was amazing.
And it was the best pizza I've ever had.
I had a salad too. It was amazing.
I mean, it was
I actually have pictures of it too.
Yeah. So it is, I mean, unbelievable. We don't have as many pictures of Mario's as I would like to have had. Because I was just like
photo shoot Mario's,
just elbow deep in a pizza that I mean is blowing my mind.
Should have got a portrait of you in the pizza.
I know I would have looked happy.
Would have blown it up and put it in the house.
Like as equally frightened as I was with our last story, I was very, very happy when it came for this pizza.
It was good.
So I mean it just stuck with me, and I'm like,
if you only know my husband, he doesn't, hardly anything on vacation. He doesn't really like anything unless we're somewhere where there's chain restaurants.
I have the palate of a 5-year-old.
Yeah, he really does.
But
when he finds something he likes, it's almost like we need to stop and recognize and cheer for it because
I'm not above in my life. At some point, I will go back to Tombstone just to get that pizza. Yeah. So if you're ever there, Mario's Bakery Cafe, I think I looked up some about it yesterday, preparing for the podcast, and they have recently moved a couple doors down with a coffee shop. So I now think it's Mario's Bakery and Undertaker's Espresso Bar. But it's all there. It's a gentleman that had
moved from
that
New
we met.
York.
They were super friendly to us, super nice. But from New York City, his family had immigrated from Italy. So it was authentic, an Italian pizza, and it was amazing.
And I'll tell you, there was another restaurant. What was that one called?
Longhorn.
Yeah.
The Longhorn
Their
Saloon.
breakfast was amazing because I love omelets with avocado and all this stuff. And I have to say that was some of the best food.
Oh, the breakfast was amazing.
That was like the best food for me.
Honestly, I thought that would be one of on your top 5 was the Longhorn.
I wasn't thinking about that because I really didn't think about food, which is strange because I usually think about food.
Yeah, you're the foodie.
I'm the food person, but I loved that place and I loved the pizza. I loved it all. It was fantastic food there.
And one of the cool things about Longhorn, and like I said, Mario's was is like between Longhorns and the Birdcage Theater. I can't imagine what that place was then.
Well, they have churros everywhere too. I'm sorry, I got a random thought about churros.
But the Longhorn, actually, one of White Earp's brothers was shot from the balcony of the Longhorn.
Yeah.
So that's another place that was very authentic. I believe it had been burnt down, but it had been rebuilt back. And it was just one of those places you go, and there's these markers all over Streetwell. So-and-so died here. And that was one of the places one of the Earp brothers was shot there outside of the Longhorn from up on the balcony. So that was great. So, Whit, why don't you go ahead, tell us your number one? We've already had mine.
I told you it's going to be broad. My number one, I just put Tombstone.
Yeah.
I have to say, we travel a lot, and I've enjoyed every trip we've ever been on. I love them all. Every time I leave, I'm like, this is great. This is the best.
Yeah.
I absolutely adored Tombstone. I think it is very up there, number one close for me, because I'm like a Western buff. Like, I love all these old Westerns, but I absolutely...
Gunsmoke.
Yeah, I love Gunsmoke. I love the Big Valley. I love the Virginia, whatever. I'm an old person, and anyway. I said I'll fit in good with the people at the nursing home, because every time I would go, they'd be watching them, so I'm like, that's great. But anyway, besides that, Tombstone was just a phenomenal trip for me. I absolutely loved it. Everything about it. I loved the shops. I just loved walking up and down the street. I probably did it 20 times. It's one street, really.
You're just walking back and forth.
And but I loved it so much because of the history and just how, and not just because of the Tombstone movie, which was cool, but just because I'd heard about all these different places. The cemetery, we really didn't mention it. The Boot Hill Cemetery.
Boot Hill Cemetery.
Amazing, because it looks like something you're seeing on TV that's not real, because these tombs, it's like, they can't bury them in the ground there, so they just kind of cover them with rocks. They're just not very far in the ground.
Well, I think it's just so many characters that come through there. You know, when you're talking about Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, I mean, these are just icons of American history and really American culture that makes America unique from anywhere else in the world. And these are people that were at the core of that. I mean, and everybody knows Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday.
The West is it's just so iconic. It's just amazing to me. And there's so much out there. Yeah. But I just absolutely loved that trip. That I actually was, which is funny because I knew Clifton loved it, and I knew I loved it just too, not just for the movie, because I do love the movie, but just because I want to go. I'm just like, we're at work, and I'm just like, let's just fly on spring break. Let's just fly to Tombstone, and we're like, so we had to fly to Tucson and drive, but and we were
just
really
like a 30-minute drive from Tucson,
50 miles or less from the border of Mexico.
I think it was like 30.
Yeah, it was very, very. But I just loved it, and the people are so nice.
They were nice.
In Arizona, like where we were at, it was like being home. They were just like us. They were country, and then like there's just so much. You got the Native American history there. You've got, there's so much history.
Well, and just the town Tombstone. You know, the Earps were there for just such a short period of time, and you know that's all people think about. But there was a mine you could go, and really we're selling.
We did that Colorama. What was that thing? Panorama. I remember it's like that theater we went into.
Yeah. That was at the OK Corral. Remember we talked about that?
But it was called something like that.
Yeah.
But I loved that because all the history. I know I mentioned it before, but I just loved that history and
there are so many more things we could talk about. We could have done an episode just on Tombstone. But you know, there's a mine you can go in and tour. There was a kind of lost my train of thought, but there were just so many things that you could do. There was gun shops that had original guns from the time period.
Ice cream shops. We mentioned that. Clifton loves churros. There was churros. You could get churros, and it's just great.
So Whitney was impressed by the food, and I was too.
It was very impressive for me. Which I like to eat a lot of places, but I just loved that trip.
Yeah,
I could say great. I loved that trip, and I would just and we rode in a cool carriage that was used it was very old. I think it was used back.
The courthouse tour was amazing.
Oh yeah,
they still have the gallows where they had, I think there were 6 hangings they had done there at the county courthouse. I mean, and I think one of my favorite things is the whole time you're there, I'm like, man, I would love for, my dad to see this, or I'd love for this friend or that friend to see this. I just know it's something that so many people would enjoy.
Yeah.
So I felt fortunate that we were able to go. But so if it's something that you're ever in that part of the country.
If you like that kind of thing.
Or, like I said, it's something you can do. If you find a cheap flight to Tucson, rent a car, it's a 30-minute drive down. So you're looking, 3-hour flight and a 30-minute drive, and you can be from Kentucky to Tombstone. And it's well worth it. And like I said, it's something, honestly, if you have a 3-day weekend, you could do it in 2 days. You can see the entire town, and it's well worth the trip and the money. And it's something you can do for, honestly, it's not that, outside the flight, there's cheap lodging you can find. There is, you know, a lot of things you can do for free almost. There, you know, and nothing was outrageously priced. That I remember. Mm-hmm. Everything was kind of market value, so I loved it.
Yeah.
So as we start to wrap up, I guess we'll go into a couple of the negatives.
Did you do your number one?
Yeah, that was Avenue of the Giants.
Okay,
that was
sorry.
So we'll go ahead and get into a couple of negatives. I think Whitney's already said one.
Yeah, I said one.
So she has two. I have one. So I'll let her do one of hers. I'll do one, and then she will, and then we'll kind of close out.
Excuse me.
We went over a little bit. I'm trying to get these around 30 to 40 minutes, but we're already a little over, so we'll go fast through these.
Okay. So, if I don't cough because I've got a little bit of a scratchy throat, my two negatives left were, since we just talked about Tombstone, I want to say my negative about Tombstone.
Okay.
We stayed at the White Earth Hotel, and I hope this is vengeance.
It's kind of Airbnb.
I won't say vengeance.
Bed and breakfast. Sorry, not Airbnb.
I really want to say this because I felt like I really wanted to say this while I was there.
Yeah.
The lady who was running that place was a bear, okay? The lady was so mean. So
she was not from the area. And so Whitney and I had this trip planned for a little bit. We decided that we were going to go, and kind of, I don't know, a week maybe before, we invited Caitlin, and she's like, "Yeah, that would be something I would love to do." So come on with us. You know, we love having people travel with us.
We do that all the time, right?
Yeah. So we really didn't think anything about it, and we had this room booked in Tombstone, and
it was a big room. It had like a huge king size bed, like a little chairs and things.
Yeah,
and,
couch.
I mean, it was a big room, and like so Caitlin, we decided to take her. So
and we're like, instead of her we're only in Tombstone one night. Instead of her getting her own room,
we were like, let her stay with us.
Yeah, just sleep on the floor. Do we take an air mattress?
Like she and her suitcase fit like a twin size air mattress.
Yeah, we took an air mattress. So she later and
I tried. Okay, so first of all,
I never thought anything about it.
No, I mean, because how many people take people in a hotel with them? Like you may put like 2, 4, put whatever, but sometimes people just come along and you have an extra person.
Yeah, I just really never thought anything about it.
And I wasn't trying to be mean or to cheat anybody or do anything, but I had actually tried emailing. First of all, I loved the place. Was a really nice place. It was themed. The rooms were themed.
Yeah, kind of a regional.
I think we stayed in the. Was it the characters?
It was the White.
The water.
It was like the number one room they had.
So we stayed. You know, it was so cool, a real cool experience. But I tried to email them over and over and ask them about adding another person or adding another room, and no one ever answered me back. I mean, never got a response. And here we were about to travel, and we had already checked with the other places, and they wouldn't answer us.
And literally, like we walked around town all day. We parked our vehicle there.
I seen the woman that run it. She lives like in the lower part.
Yeah.
She'd seen us over and over. Well, the last day we're getting ready to leave, and they had us.
We were there one night, and we literally were there, like, we went in and slept. Mm-hmm. And got up and left. Like, we were in the hotel, I mean, maybe awake 30 minutes.
Yeah, we didn't stay in it because we were out. And, like, the night before, like, we'd passed her on the stairway. We and Caitlin had sit outside the front of the place, like at their little tables, all these things. So, and then we're getting ready to leave, and it's that morning, and they have a little sitting area. And of course, I have to experience every part of something.
They had a little continental breakfast.
So I thought it was cute. It was really cute, and I was like, this kind of reminds me of something I would see on TV. Well, it was really interesting. So I was like, Caitlin, I dragged her out, and I'm like, let's sit at the table and eat some like Danishes or whatever.
So I didn't even eat breakfast.
No, we didn't. It's the first time I
took a shower, and they like, well, we're gonna grab breakfast while you're in the shower.
It was just like a muffin, something like a Danish, and then we got some I think it had some water or something. And we really, Caitlin may not even got anything. I don't remember, but I was just sitting there. We were kind of talking, waiting on Clifton, and the lady comes out and she bawls us out. She's like, "How many people were in that room last night?" And I was like, "Well, 3." And she was like, "That room is not made for 3 people." She was like, she went on and on. And the long story short, after she jumped us at one side and down the other, she said, "I have to charge you for another person." So they ended up charging, what was
$200.
it? $200 extra on our card.
And that was more than the room cost.
Yeah, that was more than what a room was. So she charged us $200. She said the owners would want to do that and all this, that, and other. I tried to email them.
Their thing was like, it was a policy that you couldn't have any extra people. And I was like, well, that's not on your website anywhere.
It was not anywhere. We looked.
And she's like, well, it's not possible to list all your policies. I was like,
and then she said, then I said, well, there's a king size bed. Really, technically, 3 people could sleep in a king size bed. And she was like, well, that's not what it's meant for. It's meant for 2 people.
Yeah, and she went on this spiel. I remember you telling me, like, well, we have to account for expenses and we have to really budget our money.
Electricity, water, food.
And food. I was like, well, I didn't eat anything. And
yeah, it was so bad because, and I'm, just closing this out or whatever, it bummed me out so bad because we were so excited and had such a good time. It put such a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
That I told him I probably wouldn't ever want to stay there again. So that was just a really big bummer because we did end up having to pay an extra $200.
I mean, I'd stay there again because, I mean, the room was nice, but
yeah.
I mean, it just,
I was mad for a while. I had to calm down. I was pretty upset.
Yeah. I would like to say that she gets over it fast, but it's been 1.5 years, and you can tell she's clearly not over it.
A little salty.
So,
just have to say if that's
so we'll get to my negative. And this was not really an experience we had. Nobody had done us wrong here, but it was kind of the atmosphere and the attitude in Oakland and San Francisco.
That's
okay. So I mentioned earlier we were not able to get to Alcatraz in time for the tour, and so we fly in, and the plan was, okay, I'm going to rent a car. We're driving straight to San Francisco, over to the bay, going to Alcatraz. Then we'll go back to the room and check in and all this stuff. Because that was really one of the things we wanted to do. And so we get to the rental car place, and this lady's like, okay, you guys are from out of town? We're like, yeah. And she's like, where are you staying? And we told her. And she said, so listen. She said, I'm just going to tell you, do not go anywhere before you go to your hotel. And I'm like, what? And she's like, we have serious crime problems in these cities. And
I understand.
And I'm like, okay. I'm like, big cities, there's places in, in Kentucky, in the mountains you probably won't want to go. And I'm like, oh, well, that's no big deal. She's like, no. People are probably going to be watching you when you leave here, knowing it's a rental car, and they're going to look to like assault you. And I'm like, what?
And then she told us a story about a lady who had been there the week
she's
before.
She's like, just last week, this lady came, had her luggage, put it in the passenger seat. She's in the driver's seat, goes to a drive-through, and a guy walks up, busts her window out, steals her, all her money or laptop or all her luggage and is gone. And she's
the drive-through.
And she's like, that happens all the time. Don't go anywhere. Don't get anything to eat. And I'm like, man.
So bummed. So, I'll just be, what I put on mine, because we were the same, I just put lady who scared me to death at Oakland. Because she upset me so bad. I walked around to Caitlin and I was traumatized. Like, I really was afraid. Like, it scared me. It kind of put a damper on that first little bit.
And I think San Francisco kind of has a persona. I guess, people from outside of San Francisco, maybe you either know it for the tech or maybe, just kind of the stereotypes of it. And I will say, when we were there, the city was beautiful. The hills were more steep than I could imagine. But I just thought the attitude of the people was like, most places we've been, I would say 99% of places we go, people are proud of where they're from. They love their hometown. And that was just not the case of what I got, our experience in San Francisco and Oakland. It was people like, you just got to be careful. It's a dump. And I was like, we went to places, I'll say that was not the case. It was beautiful. Now, there are places everywhere you can go.
I could tell you places here not to go.
Yeah, I mean, there are bad characters everywhere. But what I found is there are good people. And when you're proud of your town and you're proud of where you come from, it helps.
Definitely.
Pride, builds things. And there's no way for the situation to get better if you're just kind of surrendering and saying, oh, don't go here. Don't stay here. And pretty much the lady's like, don't stay here any longer than you have to stay. And I was like, oh, my goodness.
It really scared me. I'm honest.
Yeah, and so I was like, so I will say this. I would have no trouble going back to San Francisco or, Oakland. There was where we went, I felt fine. But it was beautiful. I mean, it was beautiful. It was a great climate and all this stuff. So I enjoyed it, and I hope whatever they're dealing with there, they can they can kind of get over and get back to being a city that has a lot of potential.
And I have one more interesting story to tell.
Okay, let's hear it.
And my throat would cooperate. We were driving out of Oakland, and cars are slowing down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, we're from the South. We pull over for funeral processions. You know, if somebody's coming to a funeral, we pull over. Well, so we're slowing down to pull over, and all these cars are coming out. So I'm like, it's a hearse. They're having a funeral. I was like, these people in Oakland, they're so nice. You know, I'm like, they're pulling over just like we do in the South for these people. Well, they were pulling over because
cops were stopping traffic.
Yeah, the cops were stopping traffic because the vice president was actually driving back to the airport to fly back to D.C. because she was in the town talking about water or something, they said. Yeah. But so the whole time I thought they were pulling over for a funeral procession because that's what we do in the South. It was the vice president. So, yeah.
Passed right by her. So, yeah, that was right when we get there. And what I remember then is like, that was when I got a little worried. They're like, they told us not to stop anywhere, and we're sitting ducks here.
We're right at it was like a railroad track.
Right where you pull out of the place where people are supposed to be watching you. So, yeah, that was funny. So, guys, we're going to wrap up. We appreciate everybody listening. Like I said, everything that we've talked about, we're going to have pictures of, maybe even of the vice president driving by, if I remember correctly. But thank you for listening to the Kentucky Couple Travel Podcast. You can find all of our stuff on our Facebook page, the Kentucky Couple. And remember, we have a website where everything that we talk about in the podcast, we'll have blog posts up about all the pictures and videos from those trips, KentuckyCouple.com. Thanks, guys.
See you later.